Guys, today we're back with another deep dive. Cerberus was our last one that we covered, and we deemed it one of the weirdest weapons in Destiny 2. Now, even though it was really weird, we had to acknowledge its cult following. And let me just say, personally, I love how quirky Cerberus is. And despite being odd or even underperforming, every weapon has an opportunity to find a place in the meta, right? Well, the subject of today's video begs to differ. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about the exotic grenade launcher that nobody, not a single soul, seriously considered using over the last 2.5 years, and that is Salvation's Grip. Since its Beyond Light introduction, Salvation's Grip has been the undisputed king of the anti-meta. And not the good kind of anti-meta, where it's like, yo, this weapon actually combats the meta. No, the kind of anti-meta that is so useless that every Blueberry and Conqueror knew to leave it in the vault, or most likely break it down for materials. Bungie took pity on this portable McDonald's ice cream machine and gave it a full rework at the start of Season the Deep. Until then, it cost one entire heavy ammo shot to create a small stasis crystal. If you charged it, you got a single larger crystal, which is still less than a glacier nade. And outside of like platforming with it, it was pretty much next to useless. It also required the purchase and completion of Beyond Light, so it wasn't like this weapon was free. No, you had to pay to acquire literally one of the most useless weapons in the game. Using Salvation's Grip anywhere in Destiny has always been a bad value proposition, but its update fixed every problem it had, while simultaneously revealing a few new ones. So how does it all shake out? Let's dive in. Now, starting with our performance, in our pre-patch testing, we showed that in the year of our Traveler, 2023, an exotic heavy weapon in Destiny 2 was somehow allowed to be utterly useless. And listen, we're very quick to praise exotics that offer unique playstyles rather than dominate the meta, but making one stasis crystal is not a playstyle. Otherwise, evaluating weapons requires consideration of the in-slot competition. But that power weapon slot, that's all about dealing high damage or having some major functionality. The icy elephant in the room, though, has always been that Salvation's Grip failed to compete, but it has since been adjusted to have two unique firing modes. Base fire, Praise the Light, is a regular heavy grenade launcher shot that deals damage. Holding the fire button charges the alt fire, which creates a pattern of stasis crystals, plural by the way, on impact that is not dependent on charge time. Now the base shot also deals bonus damage to crystals and frozen enemies and reloads itself from reserves if it breaks 3 crystals. Bungie likens the new Salvation's Grip to something like bowling. Set up the pins, knock them down. Not only do we have damage, but we get a whole new weapon fantasy to boot. At 120 rounds per minute, with a base 2-second reload speed and a 0.4-second charge rate, Salvation feels like an adaptive frame grenade launcher with a whole suite of bonus features and elemental hooks. Now the numbers don't disappoint either. Against Carl, the base damage goes up to 39,819 damage with an additional 10,356 damage on direct impact. That comes in just under adaptive frame heavy grenade launchers. But the bonus from stasis effects begin to add up. Against Frozen Carl, base fire damage is 52,262 damage, which is roughly a 31% increase from our lukewarm Carl. We also tested to see if surge mods stack with the damage bonus that Salvation Grip has against frozen targets and crystals, and sure enough, it does. Against Warm Carl, with one stasis surge mod equipped, the blast and impact damage increase by 10% from 39,819 damage to 43,801, with the impact damage of 10,356 going up to 11,392. With 2 surge mods, that damage is increased by 17%, and with 3 surge mods, we get an increase of 22%. But the real magic happens when you have an active stasis surge going against a frozen target. The game calculates Salvation's Grip bonus damage first, then adds the 10%, the 17%, or 22% of that total damage. Against Frozen Carl, with one stasis surge mod, the damage jumps up by 44%. With 2 surge mods, the damage jumps up roughly 54%. And with 3 surge mods, that jump is at 60% from its base damage against frozen enemies. Now, freezing enemies is easy because the charge shot creates a large spread of crystals in a triangle, much like the Titan Stasis Super. 1 small crystal at the point of impact, 2 mediums in front of it, and a wall of 3 large crystals another meter out. It's a sizable spread that freezes all enemies that are right next to or touching a crystal. crystal. Now, nailing down numbers against minor enemies is a bit tough. There's so much damage being dealt. We see our impact damage here at 14,411, and splash can ramp all the way up to 55,140 damage. And just like against Carl, the impact damage is increased by roughly 31% when shooting a frozen target, bringing it to 18,914. Now, of course, if you fire the charge shot into a group of miners, they really don't stand a chance. The crystals generated by Salvation's Grip function as expected, with all the damage effects and subclass synergies of crystals generated by other means. Against miners, each stasis shatter does up to 10,500 damage if they're not frozen. Then enemies caught in the spread, however, take huge amounts of damage. And a full reload whenever you break 3 or more crystals means this loop can be repeated as long as you have ammo. Now, this loop feels great in lots of places. Add heavy encounters, like the latest PSYOP Battleground Nightfall, where they're swarming with enemies and champions, but you still have heavy ammo crates around you. Or if you have someone supplying you heavy, whether that's with Cenotaph or Aeon Gauntlets, guys, you can lay waste with Salvation's Grip, literally freezing and shattering every single enemy. It clears out red bars. It stuns Unstoppables. It also freezes Lucent Hive and Barrier champions to give you some breathing room. And fellas, we haven't even gotten into the stasis subclasses themselves. Riding this during Season of the Deep, the current perks and surges really don't favor stasis. But if you find yourself in a position to roll Shadebiter, Revenant, or Behemoth, fragments with Crystal and Freeze and their base effects are fully functional with Salvation's Grip. Whisper of Hedrons boosts weapon stats, mobility, and resilience. You got Whisper of Fissures, which increases the damage and bursts of your crystals. Shard boosts Grenade Charge on a shatter. And Whisper of Chain reduces incoming damage while simply near a crystal. Again, all the expected synergies are here. Salvation now offers the largest single source crystal spread aside from Glacier Quake. This is more than Burglass Curve and a wider spread than Enhanced Glacier Nades. Now, Titans in particular actually benefit greatly from additional crystal generation, given how tightly integrated they are into our aspects. Howl of the Storm Slide Melee generates more crystals, while Crownplasm Slide Shatter lets you become the bowling ball in Salvation's Fantasy. Salvation's Grip and its 31% bonus damage also applies to any frozen target or stasis crystal from your subclass abilities, elevating damage output above its adaptive frame competition. And to top it off, because Salvation's Grip bonus damage also stacks with Stasis Surge mods, you can efficiently keep 17% additional increase to your Stasis weapon damage bonus by simply utilizing Tectonic Harvest, 2 Stasis Surge mods, and an Elemental Charge mod, which states that simply collecting a Stasis Shard has an escalating chance to give you Armor Charge. So anything your crystal shatters, you're collecting those Stasis Shards, giving you a chance to get Armor Charge. So it's popping much better inside of PvE. What about PvP, Cross? Well, it does one-shot Guardians, sure, but no one's really going to use this, guys, unless they're just trolling. The damage is still below that of legendary adaptive GLs, but for my PvP players, there are much better options. Now, like I said earlier in this video, Bungie fixed every problem that this weapon had. It does solid damage, it has a coherent fantasy, and it finally competes with its in-slot counterparts like Wendigo, and arguably outperforms low damage rapid fires like Carax's Distress, with a far more useful wave function than Dimensional Hypertrochoid. This is not the end of the story though, it's actually the beginning. Salvation's Grip has never had a story because it was a one-note exotic, and now we have to freshly evaluate what we have been given. Despite a solid start, this is where new problems appear. Essentially, guys, right gun, but wrong sandbox. Season of the Deep launched 6 weeks ago, and yet Salvation's Grip hasn't entered the conversation yet, let alone the meta. And its changes look good, so what gives? This rework is rock solid, but it was given to us in a sandbox in which it really never stood a chance. Strike 1, the heavy weapon meta. Leading up to Lightfall, Bungie explicitly sought to change the heavy slot, moving the PvE damage meta away from linear fusion rifles, without saying where they wanted it to land. Now, while many people predicted a heavy GL meta, it's actually guns like Grand Overture, Leviathan's Breath, rocket launchers are definitely back in the meta. And when it comes to comparing it to other grenade launchers, you've got Adept Wendigo. It's still a huge crowd favorite, but it's the exception that proves the rule. Salvation's base damage is lower than Wendigo, and it lacks access to the perks that make it versatile, whether that's Clown Cartridge, Explosive Light, auto loading, Adept mods, etc. But despite being a good GL, many people skip over it, whether that's for machine guns or rocket launchers, or even still using linears. GLs are really just not that popular in the meta. Now, Strike 2. This is actually revolving around the state of stasis. Despite Glacier Quake putting out astonishing damage numbers and some overall utility inside of PvP, our IC subclass has really been passed up by its big neon brother. Strand has taken over crowd control, primarily with its suspendability. And look, you saw it this past week when doing that Nightfall. It was tough, but the moment we actually put on Avian Leap and went heavy into Strand, we wrecked house. Stasis requires a lot of focused build crafting and play to reach its crowd control potential. Strand, not so much. And by comparison, the Light 3.0 subclasses have chain damaging abilities that can simply delete those crowds, which really puts Stasis in an awkward situation now. And then Strike 3, primary weapons. Legendary weapons with primary ammo have felt underpowered against most in-game foes since Nightfall rebalanced difficulty scaling across the game. Perhaps even longer than that if you're still salty about the Shadowkeep nerfs. The state of Destiny 2's enemy type is a whole other conversation, but unfortunately, their difficulty is largely based on how much health they have. So difficulty rebalance equals tankier, spongier enemies. Now, why is this a problem for Salvation? Load up into a Grandmaster Nightfall without an exotic primary on your fire team and see how it feels without that extra 40% damage against red bars. Look, we were rocking Quicksilver Storm, and it was shredding. And don't get me wrong, I love that Quicksilver Storm is doing this. I wanted to keep doing this. But the point is, in comparison to say something like Rufus, don't get me wrong, I like Rufus, but Quicksilver is clearly better. On top of that, there's no ammo limitations here for these exotic primary weapons. A utility exotic like Salvation's Grip is not a bad idea, but the enemies we face demand higher damage for longer periods. Overall, guys, my conclusion on this is that frankly, it's a shame that Salvation's Grip isn't getting a second look in the meta, because we've been given a very thoughtfully updated exotic that offers a unique fantasy. It also offers subclass synergy and multiple utilities. In all of the instances, this would be a huge win. In the Season 21 sandbox, it unfortunately barely moves the needle. I'm confident to say that this is the right weapon, but in the wrong sandbox. Lucid Knife and Tormentor show that Bungie is interested in enemy types that bring difficulty without just increasing bullet sponges. Strand Suspend is being targeted for an upcoming nerf due to its dominance. And Stasis itself hasn't got much attention aside from general balance patches, but there's always hope Bungie will give our Frosty side some love. And keep in mind, whatever buff they may hand out to Stasis, Salvation's Grip will benefit from that. It's hard to blame Salvation for its own underperformance because really, it does its job well. Based on everything else that we've said, to make it meta would require increasing its already competitive damage or its generous Stasis effects to overcome the shortcomings of the current sandbox, which could give us a wildly overpowered weapon and of course drown out the competition. Regardless though, I'm happy with this rework. Starting from where we were to where we are now, this is the kind of rework you want to see done to your exotics that have been forgotten. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.